Thank you so much for the invite. I'm inordinately inspired that at 9:15 on an ordinary weekday night, people come out in the pouring rain. Right? This is just for the international people. I don't want to sell Gibraltar as so gorgeous, right? It's like, but it's amazing. Really, really very, very special, very inspiring. And Be'ezrat Hashem, let's learn something together, and the words should be as a protection for all the Mama Rachels of Klal Yisrael out there, because on the 11th of this month it was her Nachala, and even though today's the 20th, but it's still within the week plus tax, whatever. It's all good. And the truth is, it looking up for Mara Makoimus, obviously the famous ones, I think you will all know. But I'm starting a new series. Maybe it's a little shameless plug that I'm going to leave over here. I'm working on a new, I won't call it a podcast, but a daily few minutes of a recording on Rabbeinu Bachai's Shara B'Tachan, right? It is life-changing. And he looks for the Yesodot in everything. He looks for the Yesodot in absolutely everything, and why we become challenged, why HaKadosh Baruch Hu runs the world the way he does, and how can we tap into knowing how to accept that challenge. And it's so amazing that as I looked into the Mareh Makomot of Rachel Imenu and her life, what does she stand for? It's amazing. She mothered a tribe or two in Klal Yisrael, correct? But we think of her, Mama Rachel, as the mother of Klal Yisrael. Why? Why is that so? So the truth is that if we just look into her life a little bit, you'll see that number one, she should never have been where she was. Look at the men in her life who raised her. She was raised in incredible deceit, right? Her father, who learned deception from his father, right? And she lost her mother at a very young age. She was orphaned at a very young age. You would think that the pattern of behavior that we see in her life would not be the behavior that we see. But what do we see again and again and again? And why is it that famous, there's a Ramban that on Parshas Vayishlach, when she passes away, we know it, right? V'akbereha sham baderech, she gets buried on the path, on the way, almost in the middle of nowhere. Why? It was a calculated decision that she saw Baruch HaKodesh some 1,200 years into the future, that Nebuzaradan is going to shackle and beat and destroy a Jewish nation. And a Jewish nation with no spirit, a Klal Yisrael with a broken spirit, is no Klal Yisrael. And she's going to see that they're going to need some inspiration. And she says they're going to pass this spot to bury me here. You think about what that means. I'm not even going to go into the Kabbalistic meanings of what it means to have a burial place, what it means to be buried next to your life's partner, what it means to give that up. That is some sacrifice. And why does she do it? She does it because she's the quintessential Jewish mother. What does every Jewish mother do? The answer is she sacrifices for her children. That's what she does. That's who she is. You think about what mothers have done over the generations. That's why, by the way, the Farshim bring down, that's why Jewishness is carried through the mother. That's why. This is who she becomes. And of course, the story begins with her sacrificing for her sister. Again, this isn't some weekend job. This isn't some, okay, you can have the bigger slice of pizza. We're talking about she gave away her husband. She gave away her life's partner. For what? To save the embarrassment of another Jew, her sister. That's what she did it for. And when she went, and she knew her father's tactics, she knew what was going on. And she said, if my father's gonna play these games, what's gonna happen? On the night of the chuppah, you know what's gonna happen? Leah is gonna be embarrassed beyond belief. Because he's already made Siman, and she willingly gives away Simanim. She willingly gives away her husband. This is why, I was going to read it inside, maybe I should, maybe I shouldn't, I came a bit late, I'm sorry. Right? He says, Da'lecha, this is the Ramban on the parasha, right? that the reason why She'af al pi hadibur kvarti Hashem, Yaakov Avinu knew Baruch HaKodesh this was the right thing to do, but she asked for it. Why did she ask for it? Because she knew Shetahei le'ezras baneha kashiyagale nuvuzradan. Because she saw it. She saw what was going to happen. My children are going to need something. And you know what the Midrash brings down? You know this Midrash already, I'm sure of it. But the Midrash tells us that whilst these children were being shackled and beaten and taken into Galut, there was no guarantees that they were coming back from Galut. And there was a massive tumult in heaven. Avraham Avinu starts to beseech on behalf of the Jewish people. Yitzchak gets involved. Yaakov gets involved. And you know what happens? None of them get answered. Moshe Rabbeinu, Raya Mahemna. Everyone starts to ask for Klal Yisrael, that Hashem shouldn't forsake his children. And the Midrash says it so clearly. And the pasuk that we know so well, the pasuk in Yirmiyah, I had to look it up, I didn't know where it was, right? Pasuk in Yirmiyah, Lamed Aleph, Perek Lamed Aleph. Rachel mevakal baneha, we know this pasuk so well. Almost like a quiet, unassuming voice in heaven. And Mama Rachel says, please HaKadosh Baruch Hu, not my kids. Don't let them go. They may have betrayed you, and they did. And they betrayed Hashem badly. And they were deserving of the fate that was befalling them at the time. But this is the power of a Jewish mother. A one that gives up and continues to give up. Why? For the good of something else, someone else. And this holds power in Shamayim. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, you know what this pasuk is going to say. Hashem says, Rachel, withhold your tears. Don't worry. Kol b'ramah nishma, that voice on high, this is what it's referring to. Rachel mevakal banea, Rachel is crying for her kids. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu answers, and he says, Yesh sachar lif'ulatech. Your actions here are praiseworthy, not only praiseworthy, but they're indeed successful. V'shavu banim ligvulam, I promise you. You can stop crying. V'shavu banim ligvulam, your children will come home. And indeed, a few years later, we did. Why? With the zechut of Rachel Imenu. It's unbelievable. This is the nature of a Jewish mother. So when you look at the basis of this, why was it so successful? Some Farshim all point out. Because she lived her life in the most selfless way possible. That's it. And that's why, by the way, Mesirut Nefesh, to this day, carries one of the most powerful antidotes to personal tragedy. And you can see this in many different ways. I don't want to spend all night over here. I get already, have respect that you all came out. But you can see this again and again and again. I'll give you one example. In Mitzrayim, you know when the Haggadah says, Hashem saw you in Egypt, va'at erom ve'eryah. What does it mean? The Farshim tell us that there was no zechutim. And I would like you to use a template of this story that I'm telling you and borrow it for today. Imagine Hashem is ready to send Klal Yisrael out of Galut. Imagine, halavai, that Hashem, the sound of the shofar, and will dance in the streets. Imagine. The word genocide will go forever. Yeah? What will happen? V'chol harish'ah kerega yovedu. You know what the Sfarim say? What's going to happen when Mashiach comes? Wickedness will melt away like a hot blast of air. It's just going to melt away, an ice block. It'll just fizzle away. There will be no purpose. Hashem will be revealed. We'll be safe. There'll be no more worry. Imagine we're ready for that moment. And that's what happened, by the way. Hashem came to Moshe Rabbeinu at the burning bush, correct? And he sent him down to Egypt. And what happened? Things only got worse. And Moshe Rabbeinu, to cut a long story short, said, Lama hare'ota lamazeh, v'lamazeh shalachtani. Moshe's question was not stam a question of, why? It's not fair. It wasn't that kind of a question. It was a calculated question. Moshe Rabbeinu is saying to Hashem, you revealed yourself to me in the Sinai in the burning bush. If time for Mashiach is now, if I'm the reluctant leader to take these people out of Mitzrayim, then great. The story should look like this. I should come down to Egypt, say, hi, Hashem has sent me. Here's the simanim. Here's my stick. Look at this, etc., etc. Thank you so much. And it should work. Paro should say, oh, okay, fine, fantastic. Let them go. But that doesn't happen. In fact, the story takes a turn for the worse. What happens? Nirpim atem nirpim, says Paro about Moshe Rabbeinu. You're disturbing the people. Now, because you've come, Moshe Rabbeinu, I'm going to make the situation worse. And you all know what happened. Whilst the Jews had a crazy quota of bricks to make every day, Paro says, yeah, but now, no straw. And now these poor, beaten Jews are going to have to run around like headless chickens to try and find the material to make their incredible quota, which they can't make anyways. Says Moshe Rabbeinu HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I don't understand. Lama zeh shelachtani? Why send me? And Moshe's question is a calculated one. Listen, if it's time for Mashiach, then it should have worked. If it's the time to take the Jews out of Egypt, then great. But if not, why bring their hopes up? Can you imagine these people? It was hard for them to even hear good news. But when the good news came, and some of them believed, then it was a false Messiah. Definitely not. Why? Look what Paro's doing. And the reaction was so bad. Moshe Rabbeinu said to Hashem, why does it have to be that way? And the truth is, we can build this even deeper. Moshe Rabbeinu says, Ki me'az ba'ati el Paro heira la'am hazeh. Moshe used that word as. Later on, as Yashir Moshe, the Medrash says, I sinned with the word as. That's also a subject in and of itself. Why does it help if you use the same word to rectify a problem? And the truth is, it doesn't. But what Moshe was saying, in a long story, distilled short just to the point that I want to borrow from it, is a tremendous yesod in all of Torah understanding, in all of understanding of why Hashem does what he does, and how he deals with us. And the Sfarim HaKadoshim write a very simple question, a very simple point. The truth is, the time for Mashiach had come. The Jews in Hashem's cosmic vision, who knows everything, the story from beginning to end, this was the time. They were going to be sent out now. And you and I both know it did happen. There was just one problem. It was a technicality. Everything Hashem does, Hashem is truth. So if something's going to happen, it has to happen, and it has to rightfully happen. There was just one technical issue, and that is as Klal Yisrael stood in that moment in time, they were just on zero in the bank as far as Zechutim was concerned. They were ready, the sale was on, Mashiach is here available, you've got to swipe that credit card, and they had zero. So Hashem said to Moshe, what did Hashem answer Moshe? When Moshe complained and said, so to speak, said, I don't understand what's happening. What did Hashem answer him? Hashem answered him like that, Ata tireh, now you're going to see. Now you're going to see what I'm going to do to Paro. Ki b'yad chazaka yigar Hashem. He's going to, big miracles, the Jews are going to go free. The truth is, again, you could ask the question, that's not an answer. The question Moshe is asking is, why send me then? If it's still to happen, let all the misery go, and then let me take them out. Why do it this way? And the crux of the answer is like this, that the truth is, the Jews, like I said just now, had no zechutim. Mashiach was there for them, but they just couldn't afford it. So Hashem, berov chazdo, engineered a situation where Jews could be utterly selfless for other Jews. And I'll tell you the punchline right now. I'm ruining my whole speech. If you give someone else, something they don't rightfully deserve, midah keneged midah, Hashem will give you something you don't deserve. And who here could sit here and say, oh, I deserve all of the chesed that I have in my life? Yeah, that's rightfully mine. By the way, you want to look how the Shar B'tachon says, never say such a thing. What does the pasuk say? V'havoteach b'Hashem chesed Yisov Avenu. Somebody who gives it totally up to Hashem, you get chesed. What is chesed? It's chinam, it's free. Somebody who says, this is happening because of a punishment, or this is happening because of... No. Hashem can give you stuff for free. What did Hashem do? Hashem made the quota impossible. Paro had a system. Very quickly, he had one member of each team of the Jewish people who were laboring each day to make bricks become the taskmaster every day. So one day you would have the whip, then you would have the whip, then you would have your whip. You know what it felt like, and you know what the backbreaking labor felt like too. And every day you would encourage your mates. By the end of the day, we need to make our quota, because if we don't, then an Egyptian taskmaster would come and ask the Jewish shoter to point the finger and say, who is how many bricks short? And however many bricks short you were, that's how many beatings you got. And that was the unfortunate twisted way of Paro maintaining control over the Jewish people, breaking them in body and in spirit. And do you know what happened? The Pasuk says in a very cryptic fashion, Vayiru otam shotrei Israel bara lemor. If you look closely at the Mefarshim, you'll notice that what happened was that the Jewish officers saw their mates bara. They saw them in an impossibly bad way. What does this mean? That when the Egyptian came at the end of the day, he didn't point the finger. He said, you know what? Now that we don't have straw, the quota was anyways impossible. Now you want to beat them? That's not okay. And so the Egyptian taskmasters went back to Paro and said, your wonderfully corrupt system is failing. It doesn't work. The Jews are not telling us, what do we do? Paro said, no problem. Listen to how evil he was. If they refuse to point the finger, put it on their backs. And if you look at the Mefarshim, that's what happened. We had some heroes. And they said, I'm not pointing the finger at my brother, no way. If the beating has to happen on my back, then so be it. And who became the 70 Zakenim? Who became the Sanhedrin? These people. Why? Do you know why? Because quite frankly, they shortcut the system. You look at all the Mefarshim. They shortcut the system and they freed Klal Yisrael from Mitzrayim. We were in a situation where we couldn't afford it, and Hashem made it worse so that there could be a situation where somebody would say, it's so bad, I'm going to give a free pass to my brother, I'll take the beating on my back. And Hashem said, wow, you did something that you didn't have to do. You gave somebody something he didn't deserve. The beating was his. But out of the goodness of your heart, you took it on you. I can now give you something you don't deserve. And this is the yesod of Mesirut Nefesh for Klal Yisrael. When Hashem gives us challenges, this is Mama Rachel in one sentence. This is what she was. She gave up her partner in this world. She gave up her resting place for the next. Why? All for somebody else. This is who she was, and this is why we celebrate on her Nachala. But I think a better word should be, we should be inspired to understand that Hashem is making the situation today impossibly difficult. Why? Why is it so complicated to live in Eretz Yisrael today? Why is it so difficult to be a Jew on the street today? Why? Why every time we try and do something as a community, it's always a challenge? Maybe for good reasons also. It's not possible to run a school without somebody being upset somewhere. That's not a bad thing. Why? Why is it so tricky to raise children? Why? Here's your answer. Because the truth is we don't deserve the bounty that's coming to us. That's the simple answer. The short answer is that we don't sit here on our own merit. And the truth be told, that many times you do something for somebody else, or you do something for the L'tovat HaKlal, definitely don't expect the thanks in return. Definitely not. If you only got one slap on the face, you're doing well. This is who we are. And I would like to leave you with some stories of what Mesirut Nefesh looks like and the bounty that it can afford us. And the truth is, when you look at challenge this way, it becomes, it's a whole new way of looking at life. Hashem challenges me. And this is my ability to be able to say to Hashem, I trust you, the Tov u'Meitiv lakol. All he's doing is he has your good at heart. What do you think Hashem's doing? Sitting in Shamayim thinking, how can I make it tough for my kids? Let's watch them squirm. What? It's fundamentally not understanding who Hashem is. What is Hashem doing to us? He's giving us a challenge. And he's saying to you, my child, here's the mountain, climb it, please. Because when you're on top of here, there are vistas that you didn't know were possible. And that's what happens to us. And this is who we are as a people, who laid the foundation for this. Rachel Imeinu. That's why, and now you can ask me a good question. Avraham Avinu also gave tremendous amounts of chesed. Correct? He also was Maser Nefesh. 3 days after Brit Milan, here he is running after some dusty wayfarer. It's true. It's true. But Rachel Imeinu, from where she came from, who she was, the DNA of a Jewish mother, she's left it for all of you. You're much better than men, that's for sure. But we need to learn from this as to who we are. The famous story, leave you with just a few stories. Mesirut Nefesh, it's such a foundationary understanding of who we are and what we do. Famous story of Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol niyeh. Amen. Famous story, I think it was with the Stipler gown. if I'm not mistaken, I've said this many times, of a couple who come to, I think it was the Stipler, if I'm not mistaken, came to him, and they had trouble starting a family, and there were fertility issues, and they came to the Stipler, and we put the names in front of him, and he looked at the names, and he said, the brachot of a tzaddik are not some magic wand. Sometimes we can help, and sometimes we can't, and this time I'm terribly sorry, I can't. And the woman, who was utterly beside herself, said, I don't accept. She raised her voice and she cried and she said, there has to be something the Rav can do. There has to be. She wasn't willing to accept a no. And he said, I can't help you, but I can tell you who can. And all of a sudden there was silence. And he says, find somebody who's been insulted. Find somebody who has been hurt. And you watch them not respond. Give somebody the credit that they don't deserve. That moment, you can do so much in that moment. By the way, I keep saying this story because I'm going to inspire myself one day to be able to keep it. So many times I've said this in public, and so many times I wait for that moment where someone's going to insult me for free, and I'm going to use it. I'm going to be careful, right? And I snap right back every single time. It's just like, but if I keep saying it, I'll publish it now. I embarrass myself some more. Maybe there's hope. And the woman said, okay, off we go. This is what we can do. And her husband said to her, yeah, but it's not so easy. By the way, I said this story once in high school. So one of the boys said to me, so Rabbi, insult me. Right? You can't engineer it. It has to happen in the moment. It has to happen for real. The insult has to be for real. I've got 2 stories on this. And it happened months later. He was in a shtibel in Bnei Brak, and there was some Russian immigrant, an older guy, he was mopping the floor. And whoever it was who's in charge of the minyan or in charge came in and shouted at this poor old man, how many times have I told you, not at 4 o'clock, we're going to start mincha now. And the poor guy was just like a scene out of a movie. He just like hung his head on the mop, and he stood there, and he's anyways, not in the best position in life, and he doesn't feel fantastic anyways, and it must be hard. And the guy just took it. And in that 1 second, this husband said, this is the moment the Stipler's talking about. This is it. And he, like a madman, he rushed over to this guy with his mop, and he says, Tevarech oti, Tevarech oti. And the fellow thought he's like lost his mind. What are you talking about? And he goes, I'll explain everything later, but just tell me I'll have a kid. Tell me, please, please. This poor Russian guy says, okay, you'll have a child. And then afterwards he explained to him, but the fabulous moment is that 9 months later, this man carried his own son into his own bris milah. We don't understand the well springs of bracha that are waiting for us because of the challenge. I saw another story. I've never seen this before. There was this kid who should inspire all mothers, this story, right? They had just a lazy, apathetic teenager, just wouldn't do anything, wouldn't get out of bed, just wouldn't do anything, right? And the parents were just so worried about this kid that he would amount to absolutely nothing. And he bumbled his way through high school, never doing any form of homework or anything in Israel. And when it came, after high school, it's standard, like at you go to some yeshiva, do something, right? And the kid said, I'm not doing it. And in his young teens, he thought to himself, if anything's going to motivate me, Hashem gave me a pair of hands. It's an interesting thought this kid had. He said, I like doing stuff with my hands. I want to build myself a career. Right? He said his dream was to be a construction contractor. And he said, if I'm going to run a contracting team of builders and whatever, I need to know how to build. So at 17 years old, he showed up on a building site and he said, I'm here to be an apprentice. I want to work. Somebody laughed at him. And they said, you don't even have to pay me. And he started at the bottom. And you should know, his parents were like a bit spooked out that the kid was getting up every single day, bought himself some work boots, and he put on a pair of jeans every day and he went to work. And you should know, year in, year out, this kid got up every single day, went to work, and he slowly learned to trade. He learned bricklaying, he learned plastering, he learned wiring, he learned plumbing, he learned all that. And he said, he writes the story himself, he said, you should know it tested my threshold of my own midot, because workplaces, work sites are not exactly the most tolerant places, and they weren't the most complimentary, and I was insulted, and I was made fun of. But you should know, one day I walked off that site, and I had what I needed. I knew who the workers were, I knew all the business, and as a young guy, I built myself a team, and I opened my construction company. And he said, you should know what? It was amazing. I wanted to be known for somebody who would do work on time, do it within budget, no excuses, high quality. And if you build yourself a reputation like that, you've got a business. So that's what he did. And he said, you should know, success smiled upon him. He built a really good team. He got really well known. Once he let slip to his cousin that he was thinking as his teenage years, he's going to be a con, and they made so much fun of him, and his uncle made fun of him. He knew he was successful when his uncle hired him to do a job in his house. And he said, then everything changed. He was asked for a quote, and he came to see this man in his apartment in Israel. And the guy was asking him to do an expansion. And he said, I learned two things very quickly. He said, number one, there's far too many people living in this small little place. And two, the guy's got no money. He said, that I knew straight away. But he said, I saw a person living in a desperate situation, desperate for more space. And I thought, maybe I can help. By the time he'd already got a business partner, he went to his partner and he said, should we do it? It's a bit of a chesed project. The guy's asked for a quote. I've already lowered the quote. Should we do it? He's thinking about it, but I don't know whether we should take this on. It looks like one of those jobs that will be a bit thankless. But then he said, it's a Jew. It's a fellow Jew. And he's in real difficulty. What are we supposed to... We're here to help other people at the end of the day. His business partner kind of talked him out of it. When the guy called the following day, after he received the quote and said he was thinking about it, he said, I'd love you to do it, but please, I can pay you half what you've quoted. The guy thought, half of the original quote, I'll be doing this job virtually at a loss. But something in his heart told him, sometimes you dig deep for a fellow Jew. Sometimes you just do it. And he said, you should know, I felt like such a tzaddik. I felt like this is what a Jew does. And you should know, I felt good about it. But from day one, I was beset with setbacks. The neighbors complained. Somebody brought an injunction against us that the construction doesn't match the style of the building. We had to stop. Then when we started again, the neighbor on the other side complained. And then it was just one challenge after the next. And then he said, there was a war in Gaza, not this current one. And he said, a bunch of my guys had to leave. The team that I'd so carefully crafted to put together started to fall apart. A couple of guys went for the army. They didn't come back. And he said, my whole life fell apart in front of my eyes. So he went to his Rav, and he said to his Rav, asked him a sheila. He said, for me to continue, I'll need to hire new workers, which means I have to put the price up for this guy because my workers worked on a certain thing, but to bring guys in the middle of a job, it's not going to be easy. It's a rushed thing. What should I do? And the Rav said to him, listen, I'm not going to tell you what to do as far as money is concerned. Raise the quote for a guy who you know can't pay it anyways. That's a difficult thing. He said, but I will tell you this. It's the reason why I'm telling you this story. He said, I'm an old man now. He said, right? I'm an old man now. And never in my life, I've been advising Jews for so many years, I have never in my life seen somebody ultimately lose out because you went the extra mile for another Jew. Never in my life have I seen it. Since I'm not telling you what to do, but there's my advice. And the guy went back and he thought to himself, the only way I'm finishing this job is if I do it myself. And after 20 years of not having lifted a brick or plastered a wall, he started to do it himself. And you should know, his wife wrote to the Rav and said, my husband's coming home a broken man every night. Everything kills him. His back is killing him. He can't. And as he was persevering as a lone guy, his team have left him. His business is collapsing. He was doing one thing. I don't remember exactly the details, but he was doing one particular job, drilling or something or other. And a neighbor came down and laid into him crazy, insulted him, called him names. And he said, I was so broken at the time, I made my hand into a fist and I thought to myself, this will be the first time in my life I turn around to another red-blooded Jew and punch him in the face. He said, I'm going to become an animal. This is going to make me into something that I'm not. And he said, I thought about it for a second and I said, that's clearly not what I'm going to do. So if the guy wants to shout at me, let him shout. And for some reason, just in that moment, I received a bit of calm. And at that moment, the owner of the apartment came in and he saw what happened. And he said to me, you know, anybody who gets insulted and doesn't ask and doesn't answer back can ask Hashem for anything. And it is a moment of pure bounty. Hashem will give it to you. Use this moment. And he did. He turned around, he put his face into the corner, and he prayed for a few important things in his life. One of which was, please Hashem, put me back on my feet again. Just let me provide for my children. You should know, it was about an hour or two later, he was plastering a wall, and a kid walked into the apartment. And the kid said a very familiar line to him. This fellow was 17 years old, and he said, you know what? I'm thinking of becoming a contractor when I'm older. I'd like to apprentice somewhere. Do you think you could employ me? You don't even have to pay me so much. And the guy looked at him and he said to himself, I prayed 2 minutes ago for some help. And this walks through the door. It has to be from Hashem. It has to be. And he said to him, let's think about it. We'll start today. As he writes today, he said that was the moment where his life turned to God. This kid was the most talented, quick-thinking kid he had ever seen in his life. He said not only did he learn the ropes extremely quickly, the kid was so successful in bringing in business, he brought the kid on as a business partner within 2 years. But wait, the same afternoon, somebody came in to fix something electrical. I think it was an air conditioning unit, he writes. And he asked the guy, he said, I'm looking for somebody to do electrical contracting with me as well. Would you be interested? He said, you know what? I've just quit with my big company and I was going out myself. I'm looking for a partner. Are you willing to be a partner? He built a team around that afternoon. When you are Moser Nefesh for somebody else, Mama Rachel tells us, this is the way forward. This is the secret to the success of Klal Yisrael. I'll leave you with one more story. I have a few more, but I can see it's, I'm tired, right? And already impressed. But this, if you distill everything down, Mesirut Nefesh for doing what is right, that's the DNA who Rachel Imenu was, and should inspire us to go through the challenges of life, thinking that these are our opportunities. This is what will define us. By the way, if everything was hunky-dory, everyone would be what? Relaxing on some sun lounger somewhere in a villa, something like that. The world doesn't get fixed that way. Your tikkun is not there. So I'll tell you one story that I saw. It's an amazing story. I've said it, I think, a few times. Every time I see it, it makes me emotional again. Happened in 2008, in the market crash of 2008. So people who live by the markets and dependent on the markets, in 2008, it was one of the blackest days, certainly in our modern history. People lost everything. Huge investors were wiped out. People sold their positions short. When it started happening, they panic sold. The truth is, had they stayed in the market, it would have gone back up again, but that's not an economics lesson, right? But the fact is, when things started crumbling and the market absolutely crashed, people lost everything. And there was one particular school, a primary school in New York. They relied so heavily on their donors. And one by one, these people fell away, to the point where it came at the end of the month and they weren't able to pay their teachers. And don't ask me whether this is correct or incorrect or the right practice or the wrong practice. I'm nobody, I don't know, but I can just tell you the facts of the story. The principal took a decision that every teacher would come into their class and would hand an envelope to their students. And the envelope said to the parents, dear parents, your current tuition bill stands at X. If you can't pay the tuition bill by the end of the month, then I'm afraid you can't send your child to school tomorrow. Again, not a halachic thingy, not a moral question. In fact, that's what happened. And you should know it was very, very hard on the Rabbeim. Think about it. They're cultivating a relationship with these beautiful little children, especially those who are dedicated teachers who really love their children. How difficult must it be to write a goodbye letter? And there was one Rav in particular, who was heartbroken because he had an orphan in his class. And he knew full well that the family live on the breadline at the best of times. And he knew that handing this letter to this child was signing his death warrant as far as school was concerned. And with an absolute broken heart, the Rebbe gave a little pep talk to the children and he said, look, It says for your parents. And in this case, to this boy, it said only to his mother because his father had died when he was 5. And it says, give it to your parents, but please don't read it. And it has nothing to do with me. Yes, I'm just a postman. And he was saying this to prep these children when their parents were going to open these letters and see what was going to happen. He was guaranteed that he's not going to see. I think this kid was called Yossi. He knew this was him effectively kissing this Yassala goodbye. And he handed the letters with a heavy heart. And he didn't even want to show up in school the next day. And he was astonished that in roll call, there was this Yassala standing in line. So the Rebbe kind of tactfully asked him and said, my darling, did you give that envelope to your mum yesterday? He said, oh yes. And he said, she gave me something to give you. And the kid goes and rummages into his satchel, right? And he pulls out a semi-crumpled envelope. It's the same envelope that he had handed yesterday, crossed out Mrs. Epstein or whatever it was, and it's to the Rebbe. And in it was a handwritten note. And as the Rebbe opened it, something fell out onto the floor. And it was this woman's engagement ring. And she wrote one line, right? She says, thank you, right? Tovli Torat Picha my alfei zahav v'chesed. That's all she wrote. That's all she wrote. You want to talk about sacrifice. You want to talk about what it does, who it makes us, who we are. I'll tell you one more story. I love that story. Every time I see it inside, I cry. When I'm on my own, I cry. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. The mother says, what do I need a ring for? I need my kid to learn Torah. It's not normal. But I'll tell you a modern day story also of Mesiras Nefesh of a different kind. A few years ago, there was this kid. I've got his name over here. He was tested when he was a young kid by Rabbi Yochanan Vosna, the Square Dayan, one of the biggest poskim around. And what he didn't understand was how a 19-year-old boy could know so much Torah. He had accumulated like a Dayan. It looks like this guy's been sitting and learning for 30 years, 40 years. So Rav Vosna, who was a very perceptive person, went to the father of this kid who he just tested, and he said, so Stamazah, you have an Ilu as a child. Okay, fine, some kids are geniuses from birth. Amazing. He said, tell me, how old was your kid when you recognized him to be a genius? That's his question, because it was so self-evident that this kid is an Ilu, right? He's a genius. And the father says no. He never was. In fact, he was an average, at best, an average Bachar in yeshiva. He said, but his whole life changed one day. He said, what happened? He said, my son was 16 years old and he was called up to do Hagbah in yeshiva, right? Yeshiva, there's a lot of status going on. You know, if you come with a crumpled shirt or with a cool hat, there's lots of, right? This guy, you know how on Ashkenazim, on Simchat Torah, they do called hafucha, right? You do a regular Malei HaKtav with your hands crossed over and then you open it and then the Torah faces outwards. Right? You ever seen that before? Okay, maybe in your minhag for Gibraltar, you never know, right? Don't push your luck, Rabbi, you're only here 30 years. Okay, fine, right? But that's how they do it. They lift it up and then they dance the Torah right round, very beautiful thing. But you don't do it on an ordinary Monday or a Thursday, unheard of. And to even try it, it's the most audacious trick out there. It's like you're definitely pulling some shtick. And this boy confidently walked up to the Sefer Torah, crossed his hands, did Ma'aleh HaKtav, and everyone's like, shh. There was a stunned silence and people started to shout. The Rosh Hashiva said, what are you doing? And he's like, and he stammered and they helped him put it back down again and then he did it normally and there was this crazy, and the Rosh Hashiva calls him in. And he says to him, you are such a good boy. You pull a prank like this? What is it, Purim? What are you doing? And he says, Rebbe, Mechila. He said, but I did it for one reason. He said, there's an immigrant boy who was called up to the Torah just before me. And he has such poor diction, he can hardly read and his stomach is out of control. And he said, he was the Aliyah before me. And I could see the troublemakers already starting to make fun. They're going to attack him at breakfast. I did that stunt, no one's talking about him anymore. Dan Vosner said, now I understand why your child is so great. Now I understand. I hope we brought out just a little something to inspire us. This is who Rachel Imenu was. This is why it's in our DNA. That's why little boys come up to the Torah and worry about. This is why mothers give their engagement rings away. This is why people can be insulted in their faces and say, I'll still do a job for next to nothing. This is who we are as Klal Yisrael, and we need to remember this. Why? Because the challenge by its definition is difficult. And sometimes it can wear us down, and we need to get some chizuk on this idea that the challenge is good. And Hashem loves me, and Hashem is doing it for my good. And it could be that I'm on zero zechutim. I don't deserve the Mashiach that's about to come in my personal life, and Hashem's throwing me the lifeline. And all I need to do is grab onto it. And Be'ezrat Hashem, we should stand to our challenges. We should stand up to them. And with that DNA that Rachel Imenu has left us, we will succeed, Be'ezrat Hashem, and truly we will witness the Geula Shlema B'Karov Mamash. Thank you so much.